Did you know there was a time when books in Europe were so rare they were chained to monastery walls, locked away, guarded, feared, while in West Africa, scholars in Timbuktu owned private libraries so large they were passed down like family fortunes? Did you know that some families inherited hundreds, even thousands of manuscripts, not as decoration, but as identity? That centuries ago, in the heart of the Sahel, knowledge was wealth, and wisdom was power. This is the story of Timbuktu, a name that, in the modern imagination, became a joke, a synonym for distance, for nowhere. But in truth, Timbuktu was never the end of the world. It was the center of one. Between the 13th and 16th centuries, while much of the world struggled to preserve learning, Timbuktu rose as one of the greatest intellectual capitals on Earth. Not briefly, not accidentally, but for centuries. Scholars came here from across Africa, from Cairo and Damascus, from Morocco and Muslim Spain. They crossed deserts not for gold, but for ideas. They came because Timbuktu had something rare, something magnetic, a culture that believed knowledge mattered. The city itself sat where worlds met, where the Niger River bent north toward the Sahara, where gold and salt moved across continents. But trade alone does not create greatness. What transformed Timbuktu was a choice, a decision by West African rulers who understood a truth many civilizations forget. Gold can be spent, power can be lost, but knowledge endures. When Mansa Musa returned from his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he did not come back empty-handed. He returned with scholars, with books, with architects and vision. He built mosques that were also universities, walls that sheltered prayer by day and debate by night. At the heart of it all stood Sankore, not just a building, but an idea. In its courtyards, scholars gathered in circles, not to memorize blindly, but to argue, question, and challenge. Knowledge here was not whispered, it was tested. Students debated law, calculated the stars, studied medicine, philosophy, history, poetry. They learned not just what to think, but how to think. This was education as a living act, and Sankore was only one part of it. Across the city, learning flowed through mosques, homes, courtyards, and markets. Timbuktu had no single gate to knowledge, because knowledge belonged to the people. Inside its libraries, shelves did not hold symbols of status. They held the weight of centuries. Manuscripts, hundreds of thousands of them, carefully copied by hand, protected from heat and time, wrapped, catalogued, respected. These were not silent tombs of old ideas. They were alive. Astronomical charts tracked the movements of the heavens. Medical texts described treatments and surgical techniques. Mathematical works explored algebra and geometry. Legal writings were so advanced they influenced courts far beyond West Africa. And these were not borrowed thoughts. Timbuktu's scholars wrote. They commented. They observed. They created. They added Africa's voice to a global conversation about truth, law, science, and the human condition. Books moved through the city like blood through a body. Scholars borrowed them. Merchants traded them. Scribes copied them for students who could not afford originals. Families commissioned manuscripts as acts of devotion and pride. To own books in Timbuktu was not vanity, it was responsibility. And this culture of learning was not confined to institutions. It lived in homes, in families, in generations. Fathers taught sons, teachers shaped futures. Knowledge was not hoarded, it was passed on. Timbuktu did not wait for the world to teach it. The world came to learn from Timbuktu. Its decline did not come from ignorance or decay, but from violence. When Moroccan forces invaded in 1591, they targeted scholars first. Teachers were executed. Minds were exiled. The light dimmed, not because it failed, but because it was attacked. And later, history itself betrayed Timbuktu. Colonial narratives buried its achievements. Racist ideologies declared Africa had no history worth remembering. Libraries were ignored. Manuscripts were dismissed. A civilization of ideas was reduced to silence. But the pages survived, hidden, buried, protected by families who understood their value. And today, as those manuscripts are rediscovered, preserved, and read, the truth is resurfacing, quietly, relentlessly. Africa was never empty of knowledge. It was full of it. Timbuktu stands as proof that civilization is not defined by conquest, but by what a people chooses to preserve. Not by weapons, but by wisdom. Not by how much land they controlled, but by how deeply they thought. This is not just African history. This is human history. And once you truly understand what Timbuktu was, what it achieved, and what it gave the world, one thing becomes impossible. You can never again believe the lie that Africa stood outside the story of human genius. Because in Timbuktu, centuries ago, the light of learning burned bright enough to illuminate the world, and those pages still refuse to fade.